Jodie here. So this is the first in a new series of videos I'm doing. So my last series was for Edtech businesses, all about BET. And now that I've been to BET, I've just been having more thoughts about how tight Edtech budgets are for schools. So this series is all about Edtech on a budget, and it's aimed at schools, although I'm sure Edtech businesses can learn a few things from it as well. So this first video is actually just an explanation about why I'm so passionate about Edtech on a budget. So firstly, why am I so passionate about technology? Well, that is because I'm blind in one eye. So you can probably see one eye is bigger than the other because of an operation I had. But essentially I'm blind in one eye, which is not a day-to-day big problem. But it does cause certain problems, and one of those is handwriting. I have no real grasp of depth perception, so handwriting was a real struggle at school. So as soon as I got to kind of second year of university and could afford on HP to get myself a computer, I got a computer, started typing, and I've never looked back. When I was teaching, I found ways of giving pupils access to technology that helped them. So for example, an amazing young poet in year 3 who could podcast the most amazing stories and poems but couldn't write very well, but it enabled her to get an audience and to kind of get her writing out there while working on the actual physical skill of writing. So I'm really passionate about technology from that point of view, but I'm also cautious to say that it's some magic bullet around inclusion and accessibility, because with the invention of touchscreens, I'm actually finding technology is starting to work against me because my depth perception is not good on touchscreens either. So if you saw the amount of times I get to the point of crying because I'm so frustrated writing the same text over and over and over again on a touchscreen because I've hit the wrong letter so many times that my phone autocorrect is now convinced that's what I wanted to write. So it's not a magic bullet, but it's certainly that if you use it right, there's lots of ways that technology can enable inclusion and accessibility for all. So very passionate about that. But why am I so good at doing it on a budget? So when I was school-based and ICT coordinator, we were known as a school that did technology across the curriculum really well, and people would come and visit us. And one thing they were always astounded with was my budget, because actually I had a much smaller budget than a lot of people even in smaller schools, but I just did a lot with it, and I was smart about how to use it, and as somebody at BET said, I was very creative about how to use it, and I think that's key. So where did that come from? Well, essentially it's actually come from my upbringing. So we were brought up well below the breadline, with times that we just had nothing in the house, and we had times when we didn't have a house. So we were living at no fixed abode, in between addresses, going from boarding houses and campsites, and just anywhere we could find somewhere while we looked for somewhere to live permanently. And we'd moved to Brighton, and we're kind of going between places, and my mum's boyfriend was in a boarding house that was just for men, like a dormitory, and 8 miles away we were in a female-only boarding house. So we'd had to walk the 8 miles in between the two because there was no money for bus fares and things. And then there was a day when we had no money at all for any food, and you know, this is the thing about free school meals. On days when we were at school, that was no problem. We at least had a hot dinner at school, but on days when it was the weekends or the school holidays, my mum would really struggle sometimes to feed us. But my mum always made everything an adventure. Everything was made exciting. We never felt at the time that this was some awful thing. You know, looking back, you kind of go, oh my goodness, must have been terrifying for her. But she made this day on the beach really exciting. We'd walked along to the beach. We were now kind of sat on the beach, and it was cold, it was winter, but she made everything fun, and we had played games, and we splashed in the sea and everything. And we were basically waiting for the tide to go out so we could pick mussels for a dinner. So when the tide went out, we then picked all these mussels, and she made them into dinner, and we learnt how to clean them and how to cook them. And there we were in this boarding house eating mussels for free, the same things that's down the seafront. People were sat in seafront restaurants paying £40 a head for dinner, including these same fresh mussels, and ours were fresh. We'd literally picked them half an hour earlier. So she always found ways to make sure that we never felt like we were deprived. We never felt like we were lacking anything. And I think that's what I aim to do with technology in the school, is to always make sure that every single penny was value. Every single penny went somewhere that the children could see where it went and never felt deprived of anything. They never felt they didn't have what other schools had or other children had. And that was really, really important to me and to our head teacher, that they had technology. My head teacher was really supportive in knowing that these children needed technology in order to open up the world to them and in order to give them opportunities and to give them kind of greater prospects and to aid a bit of social mobility. And it did, you know, it worked, and that was down to kind of just being really, really creative with that budget and really, really tenacious about it. The other thing my mum always gave us was books. So this is not to say leave books, because we were surrounded by books. My mum would take any free books anyone was giving. She'd always write her name in the front cover, because you never give books away, and if you lend them, you want them back. And the same books are still in her house now. She's never got rid of a book. So we were always surrounded with books, but technology is a way of kind of really opening up past that as well. So I'm very passionate about that, and about, you know, and it's not about everything being free, but it's about every penny being worthwhile. So we'll look in the other videos at very specific areas of the technology budget and what you need to buy, and look at ways that you can cut corners and ways that you can't, and also ways of making sure that every penny is worthwhile. So for example, our learning platform used to cost £1,000 a year, but we did so much with it that in the first year it saved us £2,500 on ink and printer costs, in ink and paper. So we suddenly, our £1,000 a year cost was worth minus £1,500 because of what it was saving us. So it's not just about free things, and we're not just going to look at free stuff, but we are going to look at where you should spend money and where you don't need to spend money, and where you can just kind of be cautious and really think around it. So stay tuned for the other videos. I hope you've enjoyed finding out a bit of the why, yeah, thanks very much for listening. Bye.